Friday. Let's bring in our, well, I was going to say Wednesday regular, except it's Friday. We did a do-side-do with Frankie Corrado, who's back with Jeff and I here today. Welcome back. Happy New Year, sir.
Yeah, Happy New Year. How was everyone's festivities? Everyone have a good time?
We got through it.
Pretty quiet, but but here we are.
I don't know. Like I might have had my most interesting New Year's ever this year. So
doing what?
Well, so I'm sure you guys saw the news that our Dave Poulin has accepted the position of Senior VP of Hockey Operations with the Ottawa Senators. So I got the last minute call to go do color commentary for some of the Habs games that he's scheduled for. So not a bad deal. I get to go down to Tampa. But I had to get home. I had an obligation between games in Tampa and Dallas. So as part of that, there was a day off in between games. I had to fly into Toronto, spent the day in Toronto, and then flew to Dallas that night. So we did the game on New Year's Eve. I had a rental car, and I basically spent the 12 o'clock minute exchanging the keys with the person at the rental car place. I pulled in at 11:58. Handed him the keys at 11:59. We said Happy New Year. I was on the phone with my wife. We said Happy New Year, and I was on a flight early that morning. That's the definitely the most
the rental car
exchange.
desk New Year rager. Yes.
Yeah, we were at the National Car Rental drop off during the New Year's 12 o'clock.
Was Ryan Seacrest there? Was it a big deal?
Yeah, you know what? There was a lot of people asking for autographs, all that kind of stuff. So it was very glamorous. Very glamorous.
I haven't tipped this hand yet. On New Year's, I had Dom Perignon for the first time in my life.
Okay, and how do we feel about it?
I didn't like it. Yeah, like all the rage about the $20 bottle or like a $30 bottle. Yeah. To me, it tastes better. I didn't like the taste of it at all, and I didn't think there was much to separate in terms of champagne tastes.
Yeah,
I don't like
it's all the name. It's all the name because you're in the club. You got the booth and bottles, and you got your Dom. But
I wouldn't know anything about that. But
I just think it's just one of those things. Like anything else, it's just a statusy thing to say you've got some Dom. I think there's like you said, there's plenty of things that taste similar.
The Canucks weren't celebrating last night, that's for sure. There was unlikely to be any champagne there. And it's not like they're blown out of the water, Frank. Talk about what a game like that feels like. So you're about to embark on a 7-game road trip, and it's just kind of a meh game. You were in it. They get one late goal off a knee, and all of a sudden they at least get a point out of it. But they couldn't do that. What do you think ultimately they take away from that game?
It's like it started off promising because the third line gets a goal early in the game. Really what it comes down to in a game like that, it's the start of a long road trip. You want to get that road trip off to a good start. You want to start banking points because you know that you're going to have to play. I don't know what it is on this road trip. I know they go through the New York area, they finish in Columbus, but it's like every other day you're going to play a game. Vancouver does these road trips where you'll hit like 6 or 7 games in a 2-week span. So it's tough. And you know that the games you're going to be tired for some games. You're not going to have your legs. You're going to be maybe a little bit fatigued. So it is important to get off to a good start and start banking points early in the road trip. That's one of the games that you expect to have maybe halfway through the trip. Maybe you expect to have that one on a back-to-back where your brain's not as sharp. And that's just kind of what it looked like watching that game back. I will say this, like that's one of those ones where you need your game breaker to find a way to get you one. Like you need a Pettersson or a Hughes, and Kuzmenko doesn't even play in the game. Like those are the guys that can get something when there is nothing available. And that was an issue for them. Demko plays really well. As far as keeping the Blues to 2 goals, like, you give yourself a chance to win that way, but when you can't find the offense and listen, let's call a spade a spade. There's been a lot of nights this year for the Canucks where the offense has been pretty plentiful, and there's been some goals that have gone in where you're like, okay, well, that's not, you can't count on that going in all the time. So it is a little bit of a balancing act. But that's one of those ones where you say frustrating night, and we'll just get right back at it because we have a lot of games to play in a short period of time on the road.
Frankie, get your whiteboard out for us, if you will, here, because as you just said, like the Ottawa game, they got all the bounces, right? Like, and you can't count on that. When you play San Jose before Christmas, 7. Like when the going is good, the offense flows like the champagne at Blake's place on New Year's Eve. But In 3 of their last 8 games, they've been held to a single goal. In Minnesota, they had to grind. They got that game to overtime. Philly, after Christmas, they lose 4-1. Last night, just 1 game. It does seem like there's still some learning to be done by this group about finding ways when the going is tough, when you got to fight through, every check and all that kind of stuff. Is it as simple as it's a mindset, or are there things that the Vancouver Canucks have to do offensively to create offense in those games when the offense isn't flowing?
I think both are true, actually. Like there's examples of teams, and the Jets come to mind, Winnipeg, where they're not like an offensively gifted team, but it's almost like they've really embraced this. We're always going to be hard to play against. We're always going to be stingy. And I think Vancouver's embraced that as well this year. Like that's something that's really improved in their game. But I think with Winnipeg, they kind of know, like, they're not gonna generate a ton of offense in any single kind of game. So they know what kind of game they need to play offensively. And that kind of leads into the second point that you mentioned there. Like, there's going to be nights where you're not able to penetrate the middle of the ice, or you're not going to be able to get to the front of the net and create that kind of chaos. And maybe, you have the offensive zone possession, but it's a lot to the exterior. And when those nights are happening, it's like, who's going to go to an area that gets a puck bounce in off them in a weird way? Who's going to jam one home when it's kind of sitting there in the goalie's pads? Like, those opportunities are there, but it's almost like a recognition within the group that it's like, the one-timer from the high slot, it worked once early in the game. We're probably not going to get that chance again. And if we do, it's like, if the goalie sees it, he's probably going to make that save. So there's a mindset behind it. And I think it's just a recognition with the group that it's like, okay, we've probably played 45, 50, 55 minutes here. Like, we know what kind of game this is going to be. We know that there's certain things offensively that aren't available to us. We need to trying to find a way to get a gritty one, a garbage goal. And of course, it's easier said than done. Because if you could just do that on any given night, there would be no shutouts. There would be no teams that lose games 2-1. So you do have to give the other team some credit, because St. Louis has played a lot better with their coaching change. Like, they're not only riding that new coach bump right now. Like, they've played a lot better of late. So you have to give them credit as well. But yeah, I do believe it's like a mindset where you're just thinking, okay, there's certain things that aren't available tonight. And as far as what you do on the ice, it's like, putting those into practice, getting to those areas, creating a little bit of chaos, that's going to help you score one where maybe it's not an offensively inclined night.
I know we'll get to Kuzmenko here in a sec, but a lot of the chatter coming out of the game last night was Elias Pettersson, if he wants to be a $12 million guy, he's got to elevate not only his own play, but the guys around him. But where do you stand on, and how much is this testing that theory when he's being asked to play with Sam Lafferty? With all the respect, Sam's been a nice pickup by the Canucks, but not a top 6 guy. And Ilya Mikheyev has 1 goal in his last 10. Like, Mikheyev should probably be the 3rd guy on any line as opposed to the 2nd guy after the star center. So how much of it is on Pettersson to pick up the guys around him, and how much is it on the Canucks to find somebody better for Elias Pettersson to play with?
Well, listen, I agree. I think Pettersson can only do so much. And Mikheyev is that 3rd guy on a line. He's that guy that's the puck hound. He's the guy that's going to have to do a little bit of the greasy work. And of course, he's going to chip in offensively. He has that element to his game. But Lafferty is also that kind of player to a lesser extent than Mikheyev, and is better suited to be lower in the lineup. So, you stick Elias Pettersson with those 2 guys, and you expect him to carry the load offensively. It's too hard. Like, yeah, you can do it for one night, but to expect it to happen where, like, what was Pettersson supposed to do last night? Was he supposed to have 2 goals and 1 assist, or 1 goal and 2 assists, and completely, like, propel that line to a big night offensively? I think you're asking a lot. You're asking a lot in that situation. And really good players are also really good players because of who's around them. I think you take a look at a lot of the good lines around the NHL, whether it's been in years past. Go look at the Boston example when it was Marchand, Pasternak, and Bergeron. Like, Pasternak didn't have to play with, 2 guys that are better suited lower in the lineup. Matthews and Marner, Matthews and Nylander, McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, there's a reason why the really good players are really good players. Yes, it's because of their individual skill, but they have someone to play with. They have someone who can think the game the same way. They have someone who can execute a little better than other people. They have someone who can make a pass, through a couple skates or under a stick or over a stick that the regular guys can't really do. So yes, you can say that a really good player on a team, your number one guy, he needs to elevate the players around him, but he also needs guys that can do it themselves a little bit. Like, you can't piggyback two guys and expect him to have a big night offensively.
And this is a guy in a contract negotiation right now that you're trying to say, hey, this is the place for you. And he's probably thinking, what are you giving me to play with here? Like, give me something.
Well, how about the guy that scored 39 goals last year? Like, wouldn't it be nice if that guy could find it a little bit? And listen, like, I'm sure we got to get into Kuzmenko here, because like, it's a guy who's making over $5 million, scored 39 last year.
Yep.
And he's that guy that has a shot that can create something out of nothing for you. Like, he's that guy who can find one at the side of the net when, everyone's kind of been on the perimeter, and it's a two-way street. And it's been well documented this year, the struggles that he's had kind of fitting into Rick Tocchet's system, Rick Tocchet's kind of mindset as far as how he wants to play, with Kuzmenko not being able to get to areas of the ice on time and all that kind of stuff. So I just wonder, with Kuzmenko, you sent the message already. He's been healthy scratch this year. You've gotten that message across. Now it becomes a thing where it's like, once I've sent that message, you probably need to give him a little more runway now to apply it. Like, it's probably not going to happen over a 1-game span or a 2-game span. There is something to be said for, okay, we're on the same page now, but you do need some time here to put it in practice and implement it and see it transpire in the game. It's not easy for players, like, to break out of a slump or if their game is in a bad place. It doesn't happen overnight. So you probably do need to give a guy like a little more runway here after you've sent your message, after you've sent your point, which is well taken, and I'm sure the player understands it. He's a good player. He's shown that last year, but I'm not sure what taking him out of the lineup at this point is going to do for him. He probably needs to just play and work through it himself now.
Coaches always say they dress the best lineup that gives them the best chance to win on any given night, and it just seems impossible to believe that Rick Tocchet lived by that last night when he inserts Linus Karlsson into the lineup, who's fresh off the American Hockey League, and they've got Kuzmenko right there in a game that ends up as a 2-1 game where one shot makes the difference. Our poll question is, would Andrei Kuzmenko have made a difference in the loss to the St. Louis Blues last night? Impossible to know for sure, but aren't the odds likely that it's yes?
Maybe. Like, you don't know when you have someone with that kind of potential. And we talked about it before. Like, he's got a high ceiling as a player because of what he can do offensively, because of what his shot is. So it's hard not to get wrapped up in, well, if that guy was playing, maybe he gets an opportunity to get a shot off and you tie the game and you bring it to overtime. And then when you're playing 3-on-3, no matter how the game is gone, you can find a way to win that game. So, it's easy to get wrapped up in that train of thought. And there's nothing wrong with bringing someone up from the minors and wanting to give them an opportunity. That's what the NHL is all about. That's how a lot of players get their start in the league. But when it comes at the expense of a guy who, he should be playing for them, whether that's his doing that he's not playing or Tocchet's doing that he's not playing, like, the contract, the output he had last year, the flashes that we've seen from him this year, he should be playing. It's up to him as the player now to clean up his own backyard, but he needs to be given the runway here to do it. And I can reason with the argument that, well, he's had plenty of opportunity this year, but I think, it's almost like the clock starts again once, you've come to the point where we're healthy scratching you. This is where you're at, and I've sent my message across. It's like there's a new clock now for him to work it out from that point, not from the start of the season where it was, hard for him to kind of get his footing.
Frank, I want to float a theory, and I'll have you poke a hole in it at some point when you feel that it's the right time. So Carson Soucy is pretty much cleared to get back. He has been practicing with the Canucks now. He's on the road trip. At some point, we think here in the next couple of games, he's going to return to the Vancouver Canucks lineup. on the surface, it feels like Noah Juulsen is going to be the odd man out, the seventh guy, and he'll come out. But Ian Cole turns 35 next month. Tyler Myers turns 34 next month. The Canucks still have half a season to go. The idea of load management has been floated before, but hockey minds don't seem to ever want to embrace that, the badge of honor of playing 82 games and all that kind of stuff. Would it be the craziest thing in the world for the Vancouver Canucks to implement some sort of load management to maybe less is more, so that Ian Cole and Tyler Myers are fresher later in the season, and you keep Noah Juulsen, who's actually played pretty damn well the last 20 games or so, into the mix, and then he doesn't just sit in the sidelines and patiently wait for an opportunity to get back in there? Why wouldn't load management work in this situation for the Vancouver Canucks?
I'll be honest with you. I actually don't mind the whole load management thing. Like, I think you invest a lot in your players and you want them ready and available come playoff time. So why not do certain things along the way that allow you to have those players readily available and feeling healthy? Because if you're feeling healthy, then you can play at the top of your game. It then becomes a conversation. Well, does the player want that? Does the player just want to not break up his routine and just be on the ice every day and just be mentally engaged and locked into that kind of mindset where you don't take yourself out of it? Sometimes you take yourself out of it, you let your foot off the gas, and you find you have a little bit of a hard time getting back into it, getting re-engaged. So there's something to be said for that. But if the Canucks get into a portion of the season where their playoff fate is pretty much sealed and we know what seed they're going to be and they know who they're going to play, which in the NHL has been a reality here for the last couple of years. There's been a lot of teams that have been like, from basically halfway through January have known who they're going to play in the first round of the playoffs because nothing changes in the standings. They get into a situation like that, I don't see why you wouldn't propose it to some guys. But ultimately, I wouldn't be forcing it on players because, like, the players are really in tune with what makes them good, what has them in the right kind of headspace in order to play good hockey. But if that's a conversation you want to broach with some guys, I'm all for it. Like, I just think you invest too much in some guys, whether they're, mid-tier players or high-end players, whatever the case may be. Everyone is somewhat of an investment in the team. And if you think that's going to help guys be healthy and playing at the top of their game when it really matters come playoff time, it's just another tool at your disposal.
Speaking of defensemen, Quinn Hughes, the first Vancouver Canuck All-Star. We've found that out as of last night as well. We had sort of forecasted that would be likely given his prominence in the defenseman scoring race and his overall great play, the fact that he's the captain of the team, as opposed to some of the other players that you could choose from the Vancouver Canucks. You would think they have more going, though, Frank. Do all of them want to go? Miller, Pettersson, Demko, Besser, get in the minds of all these guys, given what we just talked about load management. Do they all want to go, or do they all want to save their energy for the first, meaningful games in March in a long, long time?
See, I don't know if everyone wants to go to the All-Star game. I really don't. Like, I think if you're, you have travel booked to go to Cabo and your wife or girlfriend is really looking forward to it and you've had a great year and you're away a lot during the season and, like you both have this thing you're really looking forward to. It's going to be a nice escape for the both of you. And then you turn to her and say, we can't go to Cabo. Those nice new bikinis you bought? You can't wear them yet. We got to go to Toronto because I'm an all-star. And yeah, everyone's, it's a proud moment for sure. But I think, it could catch you off guard a little bit. And I thought that was a pretty interesting video that Oliver Bjorkstrand had with Dave Haxtell in Seattle, where Haxtell tells him he's got to change his travel plans because he's going to Toronto for the All-Star game. He's like, oh, that's wasn't expecting that. Where you think the reaction is gonna be, oh, that is amazing, like, thank you. It's like, well, I guess I got to cancel the Airbnb in San Diego, and then I got to tell my wife that, hey, that place you really wanted to go the last little while, San Diego, all those nice restaurants we had booked, We can't go now. So I don't know. I think listen, it's a great honor, of course. Like, there's a lot of players that really look forward to that. It's a nice accomplishment. Like, I played with Leo Komarov when he was selected for the All-Star game. He was our team representative in Toronto. So think about that. Like, Leo was over the moon to go represent our team and get selected to the All-Star game. He actually brought us all hats back from the All-Star game. Like, he was pumped. And you know what?
Frank Vetrano gets the nod in Anaheim. Like, that's a good story too.
And that's a great story. Like, that's a great story of someone who, maybe wasn't expecting it, but he can always say he's an all-star now. So I think that's really cool as well.
Frank, always a pleasure. Thanks for this. We'll talk to you next week, and we'll see where the Canucks are. They'll have 3 more games under their belt on this road trip when we next talk to you. Those could be pretty important 3 games when it comes to their fate here this season, whether or not they start to use some of the leash and insurance that they built up here.
Yeah, and some interesting games, right? You're going to play against New Jersey, who's had a hard time keeping the puck out of their net. The Rangers are a really good team. Like, Buffalo's underachieved a lot. Columbus has had some really weird games this year. So, it'll be interesting to see how they handle the different kind of opponents they have on this road trip.
Have a great start to 2024. We'll talk to you next week, sir.
See you guys.
Finning Canada is your local dealer for cat equipment built to handle work in Western Canada. Visit finning.com for a location nearest you.